Welcome to Deploying ArcGIS Enterprise on AWS. My name is David Cordes, and my co-presenter is Kanika Kumar. So before we get started, I think it always helps to start with an analogy. So the analogy I'm going to use is houses. So deploying on AWS is a lot like building a house. You can choose to build everything from scratch. You can also take something that already exists and you can customize it a little bit. Or you can pick a turnkey solution. Now, a turnkey solution has pretty much everything close enough that you'll use it without any other changes. So now, how does that relate to AWS? Well, that relates to AWS in that we have a manual option, a kind of a customization option, and a cloud builder option. So let's go through each of those. So with manual, you can configure ArcGIS Enterprise any way you want. You can just take our software setups, you can deploy them on the cloud, you can use our pre-built images that have the software installed, or you can use ours. This is the most flexible option so that you can get whatever you want. Now you can simplify your work if you want using automation. So we have a chef cookbook and PowerShell DSC options that allow you to automate. Now this approach is the most work. The second option, the customization option, are CloudFormation templates. Now, with CloudFormation templates, you have to start with either our images or customizations to our images. Now this gives you full automation through the AWS console using templates. Now it's good for mostly the best practice architectures, but not all architectures. And it does allow you to customize the templates. The third option, the turnkey solution, is our cloud builder. It's the easiest approach. You have to use our images. So you give up a little bit of flexibility, but you trade it off for ease of use. And it gives you full automation through our Esri tool. It includes all the common architectures and it also gives you high availability. Now, one of the things that we've heard is users like the cloud builder. They like the CloudFormation templates, but sometimes they're forced due to compliance reasons to use the manual approach. And we hate seeing that. We want people to have an easy approach, and you want an easy approach. So let's talk about those situations and what Esri's been doing about that to make your life easier. The first compliance issue we hear usually starts with this sentence. My images have to start from our IT department's base image, or use a particular version of Windows, or has to be built by certain people. Now, the problem is a lot of our technology depends on our images. So what can we do about that? Well, we've worked with AWS and participated in a new program called Private Image Builds. It's in beta right now with our software, but you're welcome to use it. And we would love to get your feedback if you do use it. It's also in beta with AWS. The way it works is you start with your base image. You want to use, like for instance, all of our images always come with the most recent version of Windows. But in some environments, the most recent version of Windows might not be certified. So you might say, well, can't use Windows Server 2019. I need to use Windows Server 2016 R2. So you could start with that base image. Then you add Chef to it. You have to do that yourself. Then you run Esri's build script. Now I know you're thinking, oh, build script, that sounds hard, it sounds complicated, but that's where Amazon's come into play. They've tried to make this as easy as possible. So to give you a feel for what it takes, let me walk you through the private image build demo. So what I'm showing right here, this screenshot is of the AWS Marketplace. This is when you use our images, you go here and you accept an agreement, and then those images are shared with your account. there's no, even though it's in the marketplace, there's no additional pricing for this. You're just accepting our images, and then you pay Amazon for the normal usage, and you pay Esri for your licenses directly to Esri. Now there's this option, and I've put a little gold box around it, fulfillment option, and you probably never noticed it before, but you'll see it say private Amazon machine image. That's how you know you have the option to create using the private image build. Now if you look through this, you'll see that there's a few pieces of information that you need to provide that you know the answer to. Like, what region do you want it to be in? Okay. In this case, I'm going with US East, North Virginia. You pick an AMI that you have to start with. In my case, I called it the gold image. It can be whatever image your organization requires you to use. Now, they point out there's a few requirements that the image has to make. That's the second gold box. I have to use Chef Client version 13 and PowerShell 5. Now, next I pick an automation role. The reason I have to use IAM roles is because this is going to launch an instance in your account, and it's going to run this build script that's going to produce this image. It doesn't matter too much which IAM role you use. You need to pick where you want your logs to go to. And I just picked an S3 bucket. And then you give it a name. This is the name to help you know what image you created. And then you pick the instance type. Now this is the instance type for the build process. You are free later on to use any instance type you want. So you can use a much bigger instance when you actually deploy ArcGIS server. For the purposes of building, you don't need a super huge machine. In this case, I picked one with 8 gigabytes and 2 cores. You pick some VPC settings, and then you're ready to go. Now, like it says, there will be a few hours of doing this. What this is going to do is it's going to take the ArcGIS server setup, the portal for ArcGIS, the web adapter, the data store. It's going to install all of those setups. And as you know, that takes a few hours. It's also going to configure the system to be in such a way that the software will work. Now, when it's done, you will have an AMI, but how do you use it in CloudFormation? Like, the whole purpose of this was so that you could automate it. Our CloudFormation templates allow you to launch Esri's AMIs. What we want to do is allow you to launch this new AMI that you just created. So let me walk you through that process. This is our standard page that lists all of our CloudFormation templates. So on this page, I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to go to where they have the various architectures. In this case, I picked a Windows highly available deployment architecture. Now, usually you click on the Launch Stack button if you're going to use CloudFormation templates. I'm not going to do that here. Instead, I'm going to go into this View column, and I'm going to right-click on View and click Save Link As. Now, what's going to happen is that's going to download a text file. And that text file is going to look like this. This is what a CloudFormation template looks like when you open it up in Notepad. And it's pretty complicated. The good news is making this change is not. So I'm at the very top of that file. And at the very top of that file, in that top gold box, you'll see there's mappings and region map. What the CloudFormation templates know which AMI to use for which region using this. If you look at the lower gold box, there's the AMI that we use for US East 1. That's the AMI ID for the AMI that Esri produces. Now we want to use the one that you just created using the private image build. So we'll now update that, as you can see, and I put XXXXX to indicate that's where you would put your actual ID. Now I will save this file. That's all I needed to do. And then I'm going to go to CloudFormation, and I'm going to choose to upload a template file. I'm going to pick Choose File, and I'm going to put in my template that I just updated. I'm going to click Next, and then I'm going to go through the CloudFormation templates the same way I've always done it. I'm going to answer the same questions the same way, And what I'll end up with is a deployment that's using your base image that meets your organization's rules. Now that's the first compliance challenge we've had. The second one people have sometimes is they say, you know what? We can't have any of our servers in a public subnet. Now we hear you. Before I go on, for the sake of others who haven't had this yet, a public subnet is any subnet that's directly accessible by the internet. So that means someone on the internet could potentially go into that subnet, that the internet, it's possible to connect to it. So our solution, which is new at 10.8, is we now support DMZ architectures. Now, a DMZ stands for demilitarized zone. It's a concept in network architectures to say, I'm going to have a zone that potentially could be compromised by people on the internet. And I only put things in there that I'm okay with being compromised, and everything else is in a private or a more protected network. So let's take a look at our existing public subnet architecture. Now, typically when you use our CloudFormation templates, we launch our machines in public subnets, subnet 1 and subnet 2. Now, because they're in public subnets, that doesn't mean they're necessarily insecure. So our CloudFormation templates will put a security group around those subnets. A security group's a firewall. And we create the subnet around Esri's template so that you get a working deployment. We use our own security group. Now, that security group is very tight. It allows for communication between the machines within the subnet. It allows the elastic load balancer to communicate with the machines. And it allows traffic from port 80 and 443, which is internet HTTP traffic, to come in. But everything else is blocked. You can't even remote desktop into these machines with our default security group configuration. You would need to loosen it. So we have the tightest possible security group that allows our software to function. Now, the default also in our security group is to allow any outgoing traffic. So if you're on these machines, you're in a web browser, and you want to look up a piece of information, you can. You can go out. You can go download something. But that is essentially the public subnet architecture that we have. Now let me contrast it with the DMZ architecture. Now you'll notice in the DMZ architecture, there are public subnets and there's private subnets. These public subnets, we don't deploy any machines, no EC2 instances into the public subnet. And we have set up a private subnet. Now what's a private subnet? A private subnet means there's no direct internet access to this network. You cannot directly connect from the internet into the private subnet. In fact, the only thing that would be allowed is the public subnet can connect into the private subnet. So there is network connectivity between these, but not directly to the internet. And in this case, when we're talking about the DMZ architecture, you still are desiring to serve your content to the internet. It's just you want to reduce the risk by not having your machines in a public subnet. Well, how does that work then? That works by setting up an internet gateway and a load balancer, an ELB, that handles incoming traffic. When that incoming traffic comes in, it goes through the internet gateway, which handles HTTP traffic, and it gets load balanced, and it gets sent in from the public subnet into these private subnets. Now, normally, when you're dealing with architectures in a DMZ, you might be working with web servers or a database, and they often don't need outgoing traffic. In the case of ArcGIS Enterprise, there's a few cases where the server does need to connect outside of the network. An example is the print service. The print service, when you tell it to print something, it's going to try to recreate what the user's seeing in their browser at that moment. So if it says, hey, I want to use this ArcGIS Online base map, well, the print service is running within one of these subnets. It needs to go out and get those tiles from the base map, and so it can draw that print output for you. So it does need to go out to the internet. The same thing's true with Portal. If you choose to save credentials when you're creating a service item, it will go out every time you access that service item using those credentials. So what we've done is we've set up what's called the NAT gateway, which is a network address translation. And this also is how these guys go out. Now there are security groups. The security groups are secure, but they allow just enough access so that internet traffic can come in, and when needed, internet traffic can go out. Now, the how-to we have explained in our documentation, so I'm not going to go through that. But I do want to talk about whether it's right for you. We obviously think this is something that's useful for some people, but we aren't pushing it on everyone. A DMZ architecture is an advanced workflow. You need the cloud formation to set it up, or you need to do it manually. The other thing is it requires considerable networking knowledge. There's no substitute in this workflow for that knowledge. You really need to understand private and public subnets. You need to understand IP CIDR ranges. You need to understand quite a few things in order to make this work. The other reason it might not be right for you at the moment is it's only available with our CloudFormation templates at 10.8. Clearly, if you are a networking guru, you could set this up at earlier versions of the software, but it would be all manual. The other thing people want to do is they want to contrast it to the existing public subnet architectures we have. Now, we're not going to make a call on the security benefit. A lot of these kind of cost-benefit analyses are very subjective, and they're based on your organizational requirements. So you're going to need to make the call as to whether that security benefit warrants going with this architecture or not. I will say that it's objectively true that the public subnets require less knowledge. I can also say that the DMZ architecture really doesn't require more time to set up using our CloudFormation templates than a public subnet, if you know what you're doing, because to create the network infrastructure does not take very long. The challenge with the DMZ architecture in time is if you're not familiar with if you make a mistake with your networking inputs, it won't work right, and then it'll be broken, and you'll have to troubleshoot it. That's where the time comes in. But if you know what you're doing, it's just as fast. The final bullet point that you may never, if you've never used a private subnet, that you may need to think about is how do I access those machines in the private network? So if we go back, I'm just going to go back to that slide, and you look at the subnets, they're not connected to the internet. You cannot remote desktop into these things directly because there is no remote desktop. You can't use the internet gateway for remote desktop or for SSH. The NAT gateway doesn't allow that either. So how do you make that work? You need to spin up a machine here in subnet 1 or subnet 2, these public subnets. And then you can remote desktop into one of these machines, and then you make another hop and remote desktop into one of these machines. So you're making a remote desktop connection into a machine and then making another remote desktop connection into one of these machines. The common terminology for this is a bastion server. Now, when you're not connecting in, you can just shut that machine down, but or terminate or get rid of it. But when you do need to connect, you may need to go through some extra hoops and setting up an extra Linux machine or Windows machine. So that's something to consider. If you think you're going to constantly have to work with these machines, and that sounds like it's going to be a problem, then you're going to have to make a call on that. With that, let's talk about the thing I'm most excited about is our ArcGIS Enterprise Cloud Builder. Now, this is new at 10.7.1. Now, you might be saying, wait a minute, that's not new. I thought there already was a cloud builder. There has been an ArcGIS server cloud builder since 10.1. I'm talking about the ArcGIS Enterprise Cloud Builder. Now, for years, if you wanted to deploy ArcGIS Enterprise on AWS, CloudFormation has been the way to do that. We've been doing that since 10.3. Now, when we introduced the ArcGIS Server Cloud Builder at 10.1, we were one of the first vendors to move onto the cloud, onto AWS. And there was a lot fewer AWS services at that time. After we put out the Cloud Builder, AWS introduced CloudFormation as a way to automate infrastructure in AWS. It lets you spin up machines and security groups and ELBs and load balancers and create EBS volumes, all this other good stuff that everybody wants. And so we decided to go with that approach at 10.3. We thought that was going to be a more native experience for people and would be great. In addition to spinning up the architecture, we also used some chef automation that we just hid from you, but that spun up and deployed your site and your portal for you. Now you might say, well, if you have something that does the job, CloudFormation, why introduce a cloud builder at all? I think you can come down to a few common things that people ran into that we wanted to improve, and we really couldn't improve it with the CloudFormation stack. Now I should add that this is important, that the cloud builder is actually using CloudFormation templates. It's not like CloudFormation is going away. Cloud builder is built on top of the CloudFormation technology. It kind of hides it from you, but makes it easier for you. So let's talk about the problems that people had. The first is certificates. When you use CloudFormation templates, you have to, especially with HA configurations, you have to upload your certificate to the Amazon Certificate Manager. And I don't know if you've ever done that, but it's a little bit tricky for people who aren't security experts. You've got to use OpenSSL and get your server certificate in a particular format, and you have to upload it. You have to pull out the private key in a particular format and get it. And then you have to get your trust chain with CA certificates, and you have to put that in there. And then when you do all of that, then you get an ARN, an Amazon Resource Number, and you got to take that and you got to plug it into our CloudFormation template so we know which certificate to use. Now, the feedback from our users is they found that process really hard. So one of the things that you will find when you use Cloud Builder is that we have functionality to upload your certificate. You can just browse on disk, upload your certificate, and then we know what the ARN is, the Amazon Resource Number. We just plug it in the CloudFormation template behind the scenes. So it simplifies the process tremendously. So that is a huge advantage to using the Cloud Builder. Licensing, it turned out to be one of the major reasons people had problems with CloudFormation templates. And it wasn't that people couldn't figure out, but it's hard to know when you have a license file, what is that like a PRVC file, what's in it? It's in some proprietary Esri format, right? So people would go through and they would, maybe use a Portal 10.8 license file when they're trying to use Portal 10.7 or vice versa. They have the version, or they might use the wrong product, or they might try to launch an image server, but they didn't use the image server JSON or the PRVC file they use, their standard ArcGIS server file. In all these cases, when you made that mistake, if you did make that mistake, what would happen is the CloudFormation templates would not know that you had made a mistake until you got to the point where it authorized. So it would set up all those EC2 instances and the subnet and the ELBs and attach the elastic IPs. And it might even create the portal for you. And then it would get to the point where it's authorizing server and realize at that moment something was wrong. And so that process might take an hour to an hour and a half. And you would be thinking that this is going to work, right? But no, it would fail and it would go back and you'd have to start all over again. That was extremely frustrating. Now, one of the things that the Cloud Builder can do is it can look into those files. It can figure out if you have the right version or the right product or you're using the right extension. And so it can tell you immediately before you go to all that effort whether you have the right license file. So it just saves a tremendous amount of time and does a better validation. The other thing is if you've ever used the CloudFormation templates, there's a lot of copy paste or typing going on. And there's a lot of really long numbers that you have to put in. It's really easy when you're copying and pasting to miss one digit, and you might not realize you missed a digit because it's still a number, and the CloudFormation templates don't know it's wrong, and it would go through and it wouldn't fail until you got an hour and a half into the process. Well, with the Cloud Builder, you get a much more intuitive experience. You'll get drop-down boxes of actual Amazon resources you have, and we'll know the numbers that need to go in, and so it just works a lot more smoothly. As you can see, we spent a lot of time on the usability of the Cloud Builder, and it's really designed to make the user experience a lot easier. Now, you might get me confused, right? Am I seeing double? Are there two Cloud Builders now for AWS? The server one and the enterprise one? No. So the last release of the ArcGIS Server Cloud Builder was 10.7. The ArcGIS Enterprise Cloud Builder is first version. It was at 10.7.1, and it can launch ArcGIS Server sites, just standalone ArcGIS Server sites, no portal. So it can still do that just like the old ArcGIS Server Cloud Builder. Plus, it also gives you the ability to launch ArcGIS Enterprise deployments, which includes a portal, the data store, the web adapter, and also federated ArcGIS servers that are connected to it. So that's definitely the way to go. Now, we've talked a lot about the Cloud Builder and what it does, or what problems it solves, but what does it really do? I think this is important to understand the design of it. The Cloud Builder is designed to launch and upgrade. Now, it will launch your deployment, and it will upgrade your Cloud Builder deployments. It's not designed to manage your deployment. So if you ever want to add a certificate to ArcGIS Server, or you want to change your banner in portal, you're not going to go through the Cloud Builder to do that. You're going to use the Esri tools and management tools for that and go directly to them. If you ever want to do something in AWS, like I want to modify my auto scaling group or change a setting of my load balancer, you're going to go to AWS's console for that. This is really just to launch and upgrade. We wanted to do few things, but do those few things really, really well and not duplicate functionality that exists elsewhere. So I think with all this discussion about the Cloud Builder, the best way to understand it is with a concrete example. And for that, my colleague Kanika Kumar will walk us through that.
Okay. Thank you, David. So I'm Kanika here. Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to give a demo on one of the deployment scenarios using the ArcGIS Enterprise Cloud Builder for AWS. So how does this application looks like? This is the login screen, and you can either log in using your Amazon key credentials or the AWS profile. I have already stored an AWS profile on my machine, and I'll use it to sign in. Once I log in, I come to the deployment screen. Here I see that I have existing deployments listed. Today we are going to create a new deployment, so let's click on this Add Deployment link here. The application now asks us, what do you want to do? Whether you want to create an ArcGIS Enterprise deployment or a standalone ArcGIS Server deployment. As David explained, we can use standalone ArcGIS Server option to create ArcGIS Server, ArcGIS Image Server, or ArcGIS Geo Event Server deployments as in previous releases. But starting from 10.7.1, we can have complete ArcGIS Enterprise deployment. So let's choose this option and proceed from here. Now the application asks us, what do you want to? Like, do you want to create a single machine or a highly available deployment? Also, the application gives us options to create many different architectures. We are going to show single machine based ArcGIS Enterprise deployment demo today here because it's one of the simple and common scenario for 70 to 80% of our users. So let's proceed from here and say next. Now we need to give the configuration parameters, like which region we want our deployment to be in, what's the operating system, and give a deployment name. Now we need to give the network details like VPC. I already have a VPC, so I'll select it. I need to provide a key pair and then I'll move from here. Now the application is configuring the elastic IP. We need to specify a site domain and an SSL certificate that is associated with the domain. A key thing to note here is the validate feature here. It validates my site domain name with respect to the elastic IP. It saves many hours of troubleshooting later on for site domain related typos that David discussed just now. So I click on validate and it validates my site domain that it exists, and I move next. Here I have to give ArcGIS credentials to configure my ArcGIS enterprise site, my primary site administrator account username and password. As I chose Windows as my operating system for the deployment, I need to give the run as account details as well, the username and the password. Now we need to give the machine details, like what instance type we want, how big of a machine, what would be the drive size route. We can all select from this application here. Also, we need to provide the license file, portal license file to authorize portal for ArcGIS and hosting server license to authorize ArcGIS for server. As David mentioned, we can upload a license file and browse to a physical machine location and upload to the S3 bucket from this application, or if I have already uploaded my license file, I can select directly from this application here. Another thing to note is the configuration store. We need to specify whether we want config store as cloud store or file system. What does that mean? It means whether my portal content store and ArcGIS server config store resides in the S3 bucket or the EC2 instance. Now I see a summary has been generated for my deployment. I verify that yes, these are the key features and the inputs that I have given for my deployment. I am satisfied that yes, this is the deployment I want to create. I verify my settings and click on create to start the deployment process. Now this deployment would take a couple of hours to complete, but to show how the deployment looks like, I have already created a similar deployment and I can expand it over here on the deployment screen, and as you can see, the key features and the output of the deployment are shown. My ArcGIS enterprise site is ready to be used. If I click on this link here for the enterprise site, it opens up and I can start working on my enterprise site now. Thank you. So David, it's back to you.
Thank you, Kanika. That was really good. Let me add just a little bit more to that, because I really want to make sure this is clear. You get all of these architectures. So you could have a base deployment with GeoAnalytics, a base deployment with image hosting server and raster analytics. You can get a base deployment with GeoEvent, a base deployment with notebook server and GeoAnalytics, and so on. This is not a complete list of deployments. One of the nice things with this is it's single click, and it's fast. And the reason I say it's fast is twofold. If you use our CloudFormation deployment, you can launch a base deployment. But if you then want to launch another ArcGIS server deployment, you have to launch it and then you have to federate it afterwards yourself. So it's more time consuming. This will automatically do all of that with one click. It knows what you want, it knows where you're going, and it'll get you there. The other thing we can do is, if you're going to set up multiple ones of these architectures, we can make it work and deploy in parallel. So at the same time you're setting up your base deployment, we can also be setting up your image server. And we'll wait for them both to complete, and then we'll federate that image server with your base deployment. And so you'll get it in the fastest possible time. Now, one thing that we get a lot of is we get people who, and users who a lot of times they're using our software, trying it out, they want to see how it works, but they may want to recreate it and start anew after they've figured out the best lessons. Or another thing they may want to do is they may want to set up a staging and a production environment. Or maybe they set up an ArcGIS enterprise deployment, and they're a contractor or business partner, and they set up one for every customer. But they want to do kind of the same thing over and over. They want to create similar deployments. Well, we wanted to make that really easy, because a lot of times you don't spend all of your time doing this, and so you don't remember what settings you used. So we wanted to make that super easy. Now, so we have a create similar piece of functionality in the Cloud Builder. Now, what it does is it recreates the architecture. It doesn't copy the content. If you want to copy content, we have the WebGIS DR tool that can replicate all your items and all your data and all your services to another identical environment. You can look that up. That's separate. And it doesn't have to be exactly the same. You can say, I'm going to start with this architecture, but I want to make a few tweaks to it. I want the machines to be bigger or smaller, and you can modify it before creating. I think the best way to see this approach is to actually see a demo. And for that, again, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Kanika Kumar.
Hello everyone again. So let's start a demo on creating a similar deployment. It's a very good, interesting functionality to have. As David explained, it's a very useful feature. So let's start with the scenario where I have already purchased an ArcGIS Enterprise software and I'm experimenting with it. I like the functionality that I can achieve with the software, and now I want to move to production. So let's start a demo with the existing deployment. We are on the deployment screen and we see that there is a deployment which has ArcGIS Enterprise with additional federated image server. So now we want to create a similar deployment for this. Now we go and click on this icon here which would say create similar deployment. I click on it and we come to the configuration parameter details screen. So let's say I want to keep the region same as it is, operating system same as it is as in my previous deployment, but we need to provide a unique deployment name. So I'll update the deployment name here. I'll keep the VPC as before, give a new key pair. Choose it and proceed from here. Now the application is configuring Elastic IP and the Elastic Load Balancer for the deployment. I need to provide the site domain and the SSL certificate associated with the domain. Again, I would like to validate my site domain name with the Elastic IP here because I want to avoid any naming related issues later on. I did a typo here myself. So here it goes. Okay. I validate my site domain and move from here, say next. Now I am giving the ArcGIS Enterprise credential to configure my ArcGIS Enterprise site. Say next. And now I come to see what are my machine configuration values that I used for my testing environment. I say I'm okay with the instance type, the drive size root, but I need to give my portal license file and server license file again. I have already uploaded my license files, so I can select them here itself. This ensures that I verify that the license files that I'm going to use are valid, and then I choose the configuration store as cloud store only, and I proceed from here. Now I need to configure my image server. I think the instance that I used before was smaller and I need to have a bigger instance now, so the application allows me to change it and I can choose a bigger instance now. Again, I need to provide my image server license file and I say next. A summary is generated again for me to verify that yes, the settings are correct. This is the deployment I want. I verify all the key features and click on create. The deployment process would start, and after successful completion, I can see that the deployment would be complete and it would be ready to be used. And again, the output and the key features would be listed for me to start using my enterprise site. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kanika. So you've seen how you can create a similar deployment and essentially go next through it and just change the few things that you do need to change. The other thing besides launching that we said the Cloud Builder was designed to do is it's also designed to upgrade. So when you launch using the Cloud Builder, we store your deployment information in your S3 bucket. This S3 bucket is not accessible to Esri. It needs your account credentials to access it. Now, that information we use when it comes time to upgrade. So we can simplify the upgrade experience for you. The only thing you may need to provide is new licensing information, because if you use 10.7.1 and you're upgrading to 10.8, you need new license files, and so providing those license files may be the only thing you need to do during your upgrade. Now, a few caveats is this is for people who have launched with Cloud Builder and are upgrading within the Cloud Builder space. If you've launched with CloudFormation, we have automation technology there that we've shown at past dev summits, and I think you can find videos on the internet or look at our documentation. If you deployed manually, well, you can upgrade the same as people on premises. You just use our upgrade technology and portal, server, and data store to upgrade those components. Let's actually go through a walkthrough through upgrade so you can see how easy it is. So just like you saw a second ago, you see what the Cloud Builder looks like. Now this is a 10.8 Cloud Builder, and what you'll see is that this particular deployment is at 10.7.1. So I want to upgrade it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus over here on these icons on the right. Now you'll see some of the normal icons, like the create similar icon that Kanika just used, or the stop and start icons are missing. And that's because the Cloud Builder can't manage those earlier versions. But what you do see is you see there's a new icon, that up arrow, which is the upgrade icon. And so we're going to click on that and proceed with the upgrade. Now, here is the checklist for upgrades. Now, you see in this screenshot that they're already checked, but when you get it, it will be all blank. Now, you should read through this checklist very carefully. Don't just check, and go next. Each one of these checkboxes is designed to save you hours of time. Because if you don't do these things, you will end up with a mess. And so it's really important that you do your part in your due diligence up front. Like an example, one of the things that you need before you start upgrading is you need to make sure you have the right license files. This next one sounds like it might be just, oh, it's some licensing thing, I'm just going to check yes. No, don't do that. So on this one, in order for the upgrade to succeed, we need to be able to access the next version of our software's AMIs. Our AMIs, our images, are shared through the AWS marketplace. In order to use them, you have to go into the marketplace and accept an agreement. If you don't do that, the upgrade is going to fail and it's going to be a mess. So you will see even here, we have a helpful link that's designed to help you go through those steps. Those steps take about 2 minutes to go through. It's not complicated. But if you don't do them, it will get very, very complicated. The third one is we ask you to take a backup of your deployment. And I know that sounds just like, oh, everybody always tells me to do a backup. I've never done one when I've upgraded and I've never had a problem. I'm going to tell you, yes, there's only 1 or 2% of our customers have problems with upgrades that they need to restore from backup on. But which 1 to 2% customers changes every time somebody upgrades. And you do not want to be left in a situation where you can't restore and you've lost data. It only takes a few minutes to run the WebGIS DR tool to do a backup. Look through our documentation, run that backup, and yes, if you don't need it, you can delete it after you successfully upgraded. But don't skip on the 10 minutes it takes to do a backup. The last two things we ask is, we want you to be aware that the Cloud Builder essentially is just automating the upgraded process. So we're going to tell Portal, do your upgrade stuff. If Portal has a problem during upgrade, the Cloud Builder is not going to be able to troubleshoot or fix that problem. It may not be able to even go back in that original state. You need to be prepared to troubleshoot that. So we can automate a lot of the process, but we can't automate the troubleshooting. And the reason we put that in there is if you don't have the right people on hand when you do your upgrade, don't upgrade. Wait until you have the people who are familiar with the product and can help you troubleshoot. The last thing is, this is just an awareness thing. We're able to automate the upgrades for a lot of parts of our system, but for GeoEvent, we're not going to be able to automatically upgrade that for you in the Cloud Builder. But you know what? That doesn't stop you. We'll upgrade all of the other components, and GeoEvent will stay at that version, 10.7.1, for instance. And you can just upgrade it yourself manually through the standard GeoEvent upgrade process. We just want to make sure that you were aware that part's not going to be upgraded. So really, we just have some check boxes to go through here. Then we're going to click Next. And we're asking you essentially the minimal pieces of information possible because we have all the other information. We're going to ask you for your Portal license file and your hosting server license file in this deployment. You can, as Kanika showed, you can upload it, or you can select it if you already uploaded it, and then you go Next. And then it's just going to summarize it for you, and you can click Upgrade. So it doesn't get much easier than this, folks. Now, it's going to take some time to upgrade, and as you can see in this one, it took about 2 hours and 10 minutes to upgrade. And it completed successfully, and you can see the check mark there, and you're upgraded. Now, one of the things that we've done is we've tried to make it easy for you, so if it doesn't upgrade successfully, you have log information. And if it does succeed, you can click here and you can go to the site and just verify with your own checks that everything is there the way you expected. And if you go back to the list of deployments, here's the deployment we started with. And you can see that it's now marked 10.8 because we have successfully upgraded it. The other thing you'll see are the icons have changed. You no longer see the upgrade icon and you see the stop icon. So if I want to stop my deployment, I can. And turn off the machines and I can turn them back on later. And I can also create similar now. So with that, that shows the launching and upgrading capabilities of a Cloud Builder. There's a few other things we just want to mention that are worth noting at 10.8. I know people always want to know about these things. One of them is we've opened some ports when upgrading. We don't like to open ports, but in some cases, they're needed by the components of the software. And so in order for them to work, we just want to make sure you're aware that we're opening these ports. You may know this or you may not. We have a command line interface to our cloud builder. You can do all that stuff, we have a really easy GUI for it, but you can also save the configuration into a text file, a JSON file, and you can do these things with the command line. You can prepare to get your deployment ready, you can create a deployment, you can delete a deployment. At 10.8, we've added some additional functionality to make it easier for you to automate. We've added a start and a stop operation for your deployment. And just like in the GUI, it'll stop those machines and it'll restart those machines when you tell it to. We also have a list. It'll list all the deployments you have. The command line is integrated with your GUI deployments. So you can launch something in the GUI and you can manage the command line. And that makes a lot of sense. You might, if you're somebody who turns off your machines in the weekend, well, you can automate that through a cron job or a scheduled task in Windows, and you can just stop the machines, and then you can automatically have them started again using the command line. And then we're also very excited. Notebook Server is now supported through the Cloud Builder at 10.8, and you can launch your Notebook Server instances. Now, in closing, I want to make sure that we covered a few themes. The first is we're trying to remove barriers to adoption. Let us know how we're doing, especially if you want to participate in the private image beta. Second, upgrades. We're working on making them easier, more reliable. That's a key theme across the ArcGIS Enterprise team, and that's something really important for us on the AWS team. And then also, Cloud Builder is designed to be easier and faster. Now, we realize at this point, usually in the session, we'd ask for questions, but since the Developer Summit's gone virtual this year, it's a little bit harder to do that. I want to encourage you, if you do have questions, our email addresses are here. Please do feel free to reach out and ask us your questions. If it's a complex troubleshooting thing, we may need to ask our technical support staff to help out, but if it's a question about the functionality, or approaches to doing things, we're happy to help out. And so with that, I would like to thank you for viewing and participating in this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.